Hello and welcome to Blockchain Gaming World, episode 151. I am your host, John Jordan. Don't forget to check out my daily Substack about blockchain games at gamestx.substack.com. In this episode, I am joined by the editor of blockchaingamer.biz and my wife, Jenny. How's it going, Jenny?
Good. Thanks. How are you?
Happy New Year and all that.
And the same to you. Started well.
We haven't got Happy New Year hats, have we? I don't know what hats you wear.
No, stick to my onchain. Onchain.
Yeah, onchain will come up for later on in the podcast. So the last podcast we did was basically looking back at 2023 and some of the events that happened, and obviously as we tend to do at the start of the year, we're gonna not really make predictions, but we're going to talk about maybe some of the things now that we think maybe trends. Obviously, a lot of those things are sort of continuations from 2023. But we thought that's a good way to start the year and sort of have a bit of a sort of a discussion about those sort of things. But you're going to run us through the points we're maybe going to be discussing, or some of the things we thought about, at least when we were thinking about this.
Yeah, so a few points came up really when I looked through our mavens and the sort of key members of the blockchain gaming space that we've been in touch with leading up to the end of 2023, talking about sort of the year that was and predictions for 2024. So it's basically sort of based on that. And a lot is about the relief and recovery from the shock year that was 2023, the crypto winter. Will we see the expected recovery or much needed recovery? Or are we still sort of going to struggle in a bit of a bear, which some people predict it's going to be sort of more dragged out, that we shouldn't get too bullish yet. Yeah. So that sort of weaves into the unrealistic expectations for 2024. Is this the year of Web3 games? A lot of sort of enthusiasts out there are very bullish. We see a lot of promises now at the start of the year. We got so much lined up for 2024, but a bit of a cautious sort of approach maybe would be to learn from our mistakes of not over promising and under delivering, but just sort of remember that maybe just keep on building and not going to zero is actually quite impressive and quite an achievement in itself. We don't have to have these sort of big promises. Major publishers, that's a big theme, and AAA developers entering the Web3 space, which is in 2023 we saw Ubisoft, Zynga, Nexon, these are big games. And that sort of contra those crypto first developers such as Pixels, Ronin, Sky Mavis, those sort of studios. Which one will see the sort of major growth and what will be the kind of breakthrough in Web3 gaming? Quality, still key, still a big thing, focus on the games and kind of intentional Web3 integration in games. You have the importance of user-generated content, and we particularly we're sort of looking at Sandbox. Yep. The rise of onchain games is a big thing. Now, I have to say that Blockchain Gamer, just similar to you, John, are quite bullish on this. So we have been speaking to maybe more of these developers than maybe they're sort of overrepresented because we like on-chain games. But obviously, all of them would predict that on-chain gaming is really on the rise. Going mobile or not going mobile? Is there a future for Web3 games on mobile platforms? Or should we instead expect like a focus moving away from mobile and the sort of free-to-play model? What is the biggest threat in 2024? That's kind of a... Yeah, that'll be more up to you, John, to talk about that one. I don't know, we didn't specifically ask the developers about that one. And the impact of Bitcoin. Obviously, seen some volatility in the last sort of couple of days, but it's recovered and it wasn't as significant as perhaps some people thought. So there we go. Those are the headlines.
Yeah. And I guess we'll kind of see. Probably won't cover all of those, otherwise we'll go on forever. And we may come up with other things, I guess, as we go along. I mean, I guess the we sort of put this list together. I guess the relief and recovery was sort of my one, and sort of partly because I've been looking at some of the data from 2023 as I normally do at the start of the year. So look back at like the sort of most popular games and the investment stuff and the sort of token performance, and it is sort of, I think you get some perspective from that, sort of about how quickly things can change. So 2023 was I wouldn't necessarily say a terrible year, but was definitely sort of a bad year. All sort of companies sort of suffered in various ways. But I guess I hadn't really looked at, particularly until I looked at the tokens, just how sort of low some of those tokens got. So a lot of the gaming tokens literally hit their all-time lows, so the lowest price they'd ever been, and that was in a period from sort of June through to September, even for some of them October. So really, for the majority of 2023, for a lot of game projects, and not that token price is everything, but obviously token price is a sort of key metric. That was just going down, and in some ways it's not a share price, but in other ways it is a sort of a sort of confidence level in a project. And I just kind of think for people running those sort of projects, just must have felt like just unending doom, because no matter what you were doing, no matter if you're making the game better or all this kind of cool stuff you thought you were sort of building, just basically it wasn't moving this one metric, which I think probably we will take slightly over seriously, but clearly that's a sort of a key financial metric for people. So it really sort of struck me again just how bad the year had been, and how sort of quickly it sort of changed, because in October sort of it was obviously sort of Bitcoin went up a lot and then sort of came down immediately, and it wasn't really till mid-October that you started to get this sort of upward pressure, and everyone slowly started feeling, oh, this is interesting. And but even now, as you said, over the start of the year, everything was really going up, and then there was this, it looks like one analyst said, I don't think this Bitcoin ETF's happening, and it sort of crashed everything down again because everyone was over leveraged on the upside, and everything came down like 10% or something, and everything's not quite back to where it was. So you just kind of feel like, I still feel like there is this relief, but maybe people are, as we go on to the second point, sort of, I think people have been in the space a little bit longer, sort of still in this sort of relief phase. Is this for real sort of thing?
Yeah.
Whereas people who are sort of just who are sort of not haven't been in the space for so long, or just sort of much more about trading, just kind of like, right, yeah, everything's gonna 10x, we're all gonna be millionaires, Lambo, all that sort of stuff. So I think there's still going to be a tension between those two things for a while. And when it comes to things like the ETF, the Bitcoin ETF doesn't matter at all for blockchain gaming. It's not relevant at all from that specific sector. But clearly, over the overall sentiment, it clearly that sort of stuff is important. And obviously, we're going into an election year in America, so there may be people like Elizabeth Warren or whatever, maybe trying to drum up interest, anti-crypto army or whatever mad scheme she's got. I just kind of think we are in that situation where events do drive things. So I think that there's that sort of interesting tension. But I mean, maybe you sort of started editing Blockchain Gamer in March last year. So I mean, you've not really seen a bull market. So I mean, did it feel really depressing last year?
But I wasn't in the space when I saw it.
No.
But yeah, because you've been in the space for so long, it would be impossible not to see it. Even though not working in the space. But it's interesting because when you think about sort of that more cautious thing, and what's the biggest threat? Is it going to be like an external factor, such as regulations, or even you might say like the general sort of crypto sentiment, or will it be from within? So some of the sort of developers we've been talking to, they think that the threat might actually come from the inside, of people so quickly rush to sort of this sort of get rich quick kind of, that those will be the projects that quickly rise and then fall. And so Web3 gaming would struggle to build up the trust and do you know what I mean? The kind of responsibility that is needed. So more of an sort of internal threat from the industry itself.
I think that's a good. I mean, that's a good way of framing it. I mean, I sort of think still external threats are bigger, but it is a good point that I think on the last, I was looking back over numbers. So it's sort of Axie Infinity as a sort of phenomenon. Again, it's sort of a few years on. It's sort of, I think even people who were there, like me, sort of maybe forget a little bit of just what a sort of cycle it was, what a boom bust sort of cycle it was in terms of usages. I was looking actually today that end of November 2021, it hit it was over 1 million on-chain users in the day on the Ronin blockchain, which was all Axie. And it just sort of, and it was that for a day, and then immediately sort of dropped. It sort of went up like a rocket, and then peaked, and then came sort of straight back down again. And I think I've always been very defensive of Sky Mavis and Axie. Because I've known them for so long, and I think they got sort of a lot of people beat up on them for reasons that weren't their fault. But equally, that when you have a signature game like that for a sector, then obviously everyone's eyes are on that game, and everyone plays out their own particular views on that sector. And it's not really whether Axie was a good game or a bad game. I thought it was an all right game at that stage, but there's other things coming in there. So I think you're right that it will be interesting to see if there's sort of one or maybe a couple of games that just have that sort of boom sort of cycle, and it won't be like all the eyes are on them again in the same way Axie was, because Axie was the first blockchain game that literally people in the game space who knew nothing about blockchain looked at. Just everyone looked at it. And came with their. I don't think you have that game because obviously people have gone through that cycle with Axie, and the people who don't like blockchain won't look at blockchain games anymore. They'll go, oh, it's all this Axie rubbish, all this Ponzi stuff. So I don't think that you have quite that dynamic. But and on the other upside, I think that the quality of the games now are clearly considerably better. I mean, Axie Infinity is much better product. Not that Axie will be the one that I think will drive will be the next game with 1 million users. But I think those sort of metrics we'll be looking at. I don't think it needs to be 1 million users, by the way. But I think, that sort of product that catches the imagination, hopefully there'll be more than one. Hopefully it won't be for this sort of like, play to earn sort of thing. I mean, that's pretty much gone now. It's still there in some places. But, when you're talking about people like Ubisoft and Zynga and CCP and those sort of companies, they've integrated blockchain in a much more holistic way than was in the past. So hopefully some of these games can be a bit more, highlighting sort of a synergy between gaming and blockchain. So I guess that's sort of the positive side that we see there. And I think we're going to see, compared to like the last cycle, we're going to see a lot more of that because obviously the quality of the product and the developers is 10 times sort of better. And even the people who were there 2 years ago, they're 10 times better because they've gone through that experience.
Yeah. So D-Lab's John Mui-Kwon, he believes that those titles are already in the making, and it'll be sort of one of those big ones that are so highly anticipated at the moment. That one of those will break through in 2024. Whereas others have sort of said it's going to have to be something else, something beyond what we've seen so far. Obviously that's impossible to predict, but do you think there are any games out there at the moment that could be that sort of breakthrough title, if there even will be one of those breakthrough titles, or if there'll be like a slow adoption to multiple games rather than?
I mean, I think there's obviously the one that we generally seem to talk about a lot is Shrapnel, just because just on the graphical side, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not quite really a AAA game compared to, a $200 million sort of shooter from Activision or something. This is whatever it is, a $40 million sort of shooter from a well-established but not massive team. So I think there's always the problem. I think when you try and sell blockchain games on this is as good as a normal game but with blockchain, then there's a slight tension there that the game will not be as good as a very high end Call of Duty, because it's just the scale of those games now operate at is there's only like a few of those ever.
Yeah.
So but I think those sort of games really the blockchain is really quite removed as far as I understand. I mean, obviously Shrapnel's still not playable, but I think some of those games could do sort of well. I'm not quite sure still that the sort of gaming market is quite ready to sort of adopt those in a wow, this is a great blockchain game sort of way. I still think that's going to take some time, but I guess the other one, which is a little bit under the radar, is Off the Grid, and that's interesting because it is again they're a sort of well-established team, sort of basically ex-Crytek, who are well known for their shooter games, fairly well funded again, so probably like tens of millions of dollars into that game, and they say they're coming to console. So I've expressed some skepticism in the past about how quickly that will happen. But that seems to be the case. I mean, again, they're sort of it's sort of a little bit of a game where they promise stuff and it doesn't seem to quite happen, as they sort of promise, which maybe not be their fault if they're trying to get onto consoles. So, but that's another interesting sort of looking game as a sort of third-person shooter, and they've got some interesting way how they're integrating blockchains and NFTs and stuff like that. So those games could I think at least provide I would not say they're going to be massive hits, but I think they're a step up in terms of the sort of quality, and I think they'll do sort of fairly well. And certainly if you get on a console, then people won't really care about the blockchain. If it's just like you're playing on your PlayStation, and it says like download this demo or blah blah blah, whatever, however they put it in the Game Pass or something. I don't know. Yeah, at that point you could be addressing 100 million users, 100 potential audience.
Yeah.
I guess maybe for the more interesting projects, like what Nexon's doing with Maple Story Universe, that's just a longer project because it's so complex, and that's a more ground up sort of blockchain sort of project. So I don't think those ones. I think they just take longer. I mean, we'll talk about Sandbox maybe a bit later. I think that's the other interesting one that has been obviously building for a long time now and has put a lot of foundations in. And you could sort of imagine, that given the success of something like Minecraft and Roblox, that the Sandbox does have 1 million users. I mean, quite what that actually means, I think it's sort of harder to judge. But I think there are some projects out there that have spent the time sort of building out. And of course, the other thing is we probably will find sort of quirky projects with a little bit of virality, a little bit of tokenomic stuff do really well. I mean, you just see that in blockchain. You will get like a big rises that are sort of unsustained at the top, and then it depends sort of where they come down. We're seeing that a little bit with Pixels at the moment, which has gone from nothing to whatever it is on 120, 130,000 DAUs. They've just announced that they're going to do their token airdrop thing. So I imagine they're going to see quite a lot of growth with just people piling in to try and get some tokens, and that's people can argue, is that good or bad? To drive a lot of usage through this sort of token giveaway type stuff. Well, it's one of the marketing tools people have in crypto, so we're going to see it no matter what we think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, talking about that UGC growth and the Sandbox, and you mentioned Nexon, it would seem like some projects that started out as kind of pure game projects are moving more towards that, integrating and building out and expanding towards UGC. So do you think that is the future for Web3 gaming, to be a little bit of everything and offer, do you know what I mean? It's not just one pure game experience, but it becomes sort of a
I mean, this is a trend beyond blockchain. I think, again, like lots of trends, I think blockchain can, it does fit very well with blockchain. There are, I think, quite strong synergies. But just if you just look at gaming as a whole, user-generated content is now a big thing for lots of different projects. So we always talk about Minecraft and Roblox because they're the big ones. But there are tons of there's there's tons of UGC in sort of hardcore games, building maps and all that sort of stuff and skins, to sort of casual dress up games or sort of more social metaverse type games. Everyone is trying to, because it's such a powerful tool. If you can get people to be creative in your game, then they're much more engaged. They're more likely to go to their friends or family. Look at this cool thing I've made, or and certainly if you start having monetization in there, like you have with Roblox and some of these other platforms, then that's really powerful. That people are running little businesses in those sort of things. So in generally, that's just happening in games. Obviously, the thing about blockchain is you have a payment method already built into your game pretty inherently, and you hopefully have thought about incentives and why people would do this, and it sort of comes out in weird ways. So in fact, Shrapnel's main blockchain monetization is that people are going to build maps. That's how. I mean, that's probably, and I don't know how much that will be released in 2024, but basically they're sort of looking at Counter-Strike, very famous sort of mod shooter that was still one of the biggest sort of competitive shooters in the world, and that was basically came out because particularly on map design. So people would design these sort of cool maps that worked really well for team-based shooting, and that's what Shrapnel's looking at. You'll have these NFTs that are map pieces, and you'll put them together to make really cool maps, and then you can charge people for playing on your maps. And clearly Sandbox is much more a sort of a Minecraft type thing. I mean, obviously the problem with UGC is it just makes the project massively more complex. So Sandbox, I thought was going to release 2 years ago, and it's taken them all this time, not just for the UGC stuff, but it's really complicated, and obviously you have people making things that you don't want them to make, whether that's there's all manner of obviously things that people find offensive these days, and you can guarantee that 13-year-old boys will be making exactly those sort of things. So swastikas is the sort of least of it these days. So you have all that sort of moderation type stuff, and you can imagine someone making something in Sandbox and making money on it, and all the websites writing this evil.
And by the time they're ready to launch, they're now thinking of going mobile, and so that's gonna it's sort of always something else, something more and something bigger they can do. But so that leads us on to mobile development. The Sandbox said they're going mobile, and earlier in December, Mythical cancelled the development and the running and operations for Blanco's Block Party, and we know that that's going to come to mobile in 2024. So do you see mobile as the way forward for Web3 gaming, or do you sort of go into this camp of believers who think that mobile gaming is not the way? We have to find new platforms, new ways.
I mean, clearly for mobile it depends on the project really, and I don't. It's clearly mobile's not at the moment. Mobile is not right for all blockchain games. Clearly, absolutely the case. I would say probably mobile is right for probably a small minority of blockchain games that have been designed to be mobile and work within the App Store rules, and then have a roadmap of how they can expand their feature set to be more open to blockchain as app stores allow them to be that. So I think at the moment a lot of problems is people design games, blockchain games, just they sit down and go, what features do I want? What I'm going to monetize? What's the NFTs? Blah blah blah, all that tokenomics stuff. And then they go put it on a browser, and that sort of works or doesn't work. And then they go, right, let's get it on mobile. And then they try to think about how they have to redesign it for mobile. And then they have to go through the App Store rules and go, what can we actually do? Because this bit we can't really do because the App Stores won't let us. So we have to take that bit out and redesign it. And then you end up with this sort of Frankensteinian sort of monster of it doesn't work. So I think we've mentioned it quite a lot. Mythical games are sort of are trailblazing, I think, in this regard, and we've seen it, really in the last 6 months with NFL Rivals, their American football game, that kind of launched without any blockchain, and slowly blockchain sort of got added in, and the first bit was you could sort of buy NFTs. You didn't know they were NFTs. They invented a special currency that you would use to buy those. So Apple and Google got their 30% through the in-app purchase, and you bought the NFT. The NFT was obviously 30% more expensive than if you bought it on the website. But That's Apple and Google's rules. And then now they have like a full marketplace in there, so you can see all the NFTs, and obviously you're paying the 30% extra if you want to do it that way. And then later on this year, 2024, now they're going to allow you to start selling your NFTs. Quite how that's going to work in terms of what money you get back, I don't know, because you don't really want their in-app purchase money because you can't take it out. So maybe they're going to have their blockchain token, the Myth token, that you can then have and then take that out to a wallet. Don't know, but Mythical Games, comes back a little bit to the advantage of people who've been in the space for a while. Mythical Games ran Blanco's Block Guy as a PC game, and they went through several iterations of how that marketplace worked, and they had they worked with different providers to get money out into your bank account. It was never a very simple process. I was always much more like, can we just have a custodial wallet that we can handle? But they didn't do that. They went through sort of US regulations and handled it that way. But now they're sort of in an advantage because they've spent maybe you could argue, they spent the last 2 years failing in that project to get it to work in terms of how they would want it to work, and as you say, they've stopped the PC version. Now they're remaking it as a mobile version. But now you would argue they are the sort of number one company for operating blockchain games through mobile app stores. One, because there's not many people who do it, and two, they've actually got 2 games live, and it seems like you've spoken to John Linden, I know him as well, and it seems, and maybe he would say this, wouldn't he? But they're very much like, well, we're sort of educating Apple and Google that we're not trying to do this to scam people and make money. We explain to them this is what we want to do and why we want to do it, and they look at that and go, well, you can do those bits of it, but not these bits yet. We want to see how it goes. But you can see on that individual project how every 3 months there's a new update and there's more blockchain in there. Now, I don't think in 2024 that's going to end up meaning that Apple and Google allow you to do whatever you want. There's always going to be restrictions in there. But you can sort of see how that works. And the thing about mobile is, it's just obviously 3 billion people have mobile devices attached to those app stores. Now you're not going to get 3 billion people downloading your game. Clearly, you're probably not going to get 10 million people downloading your game, or maybe 10 million.
Might get there.
And there's a whole bunch
NFL
of problems.
Rivals, good way.
Yeah, but I mean, NFL Rivals is 4 million. So I'm sure they've spent marketing money on that. Whether they're profitable on it, I don't know. But you can imagine, not in 2024, but you can imagine a mobile blockchain game will announce that it's had 100 million downloads. I mean, that's just the nature of mobile platforms. You get that, I remember when they started out, and then you couldn't imagine that you get 1 million downloads, and then 10 years later, quite a few have had 1 billion downloads. I mean, that's just sort of baked into those sort of platforms. So I'm sort of quite bullish on mobile, but it has to be the right games, and obviously, I don't think in any time soon you're going to get sort of fully on-chain games going through app stores. And in fact, you can see that with 9 Chronicles, which is the PC version is a fully on-chain game, and the mobile version sort of is fully on-chain, but none of the blockchain stuff is sort of you can't interact with that in the app store version. It's a very sort of cut down version.
Mm-hmm. And kind of in 2023, we also saw this where developers would talk about distributing on mobile as a way of funneling users into their PC or browser version, their blockchain games that wouldn't be on mobile. It's not really seems to have bore fruit so far, but still, that's still in the works. Could sort of prove.
No, I'm not really a big fan of those sort of. I think if a game gets very, very big, then that sort of works. But if you're launching a game, it makes it complicated for you to be running multiple versions of it, and it sort of confuses the audience. And we don't mention Steam on PC games at all, but I think we're going to the same thing with Steam, and having a Web 2 version of your game on Steam and a Web 3 version through Epic Game Store is, maybe someone will get it to work in some clever way. But in general, I just kind of think friction in the system is just inefficient, and you're much better off. I'd be much happier in a sense with 1,000 people playing my blockchain game through the Epic Game Store and none through Steam than 1 million playing it on Steam and 500 playing it on. If you're making blockchain games, then you sort of don't. Why would you want to be successful on Steam? You know, I just don't think you can convert people over. You know, I think that's really
not
really
ever. Web 2 gamers are always going to be Web 2 gamers, and Web 3 are just going to have to try and find their own new gamers.
Well, no.
They will never onboard Web 2 gamers. No.
I don't think that. No, but I think if you're on board a Web 2 gamer through the Epic Game Store by making a game that they go, it's available for the Epic Game Store and it's the full game with all the blockchain stuff in there, and then if they like the game, then they'll learn the Web 3 stuff. If you onboard those people through Steam and then say, I mean, how do you even tell them the really cool stuff? You have to go to another game store and download and sort of delete that Steam one and download a new one, and then they're sort of like, well, how do my accounts attach? It just, you get 0.001% of people people don't do it. It's just, I just think in general people are, and I don't mean lazy in a pejorative way, but people don't click links in articles. You just look at the stats. Yeah. I mean, I do, but I'm a weirdo. I mean, no one, most people are just, if they're there for the game, they're there for the fun. They're not. Go to another game store. Have I got my Epic account? I lost the password. I mean, just people don't do it. So yeah, sorry, a bit of a rant there.
Leads us on to on-chain gaming, I think, because that's kind of something we both like. But you particularly like the, let's say, the more complicated side of things. You almost like a challenge, don't you? When it's going back and forth in different chains and so. But so will that go mainstream, do you think? Not in 2024, I wouldn't predict, but
no, I mean, I think so. Yeah, I'm not that technical, so I would say fully on-chain games are sort of are at a level where most of them I can't play. I just can't. I'm not going into command lines, and I've had a look at some of them, but I think that's sort of that is sort of the difficult point, the balancing act, where the people making those games at the moment are, in the vast majority, super geeky programmers who are making really interesting stuff, but they're making those games for their 1,000 of their mates. I mean, that's sort of what Lattice are doing, really. I think I mean, there's a really controlled market, that a really constrained market. I guess it's what David Amore's doing with Playmint is a bit more interesting because he's a proper game developer. So we'll see. Is it downstream their game or upstream? Never get it right. Downstream, I think. We'll see what they're going to do with theirs, because downstream. So I think it's a great place for experimentation, and it is interesting that I think the media are covering that thing a lot more. I guess I suppose one back to you though, because I think one of the interesting things for me this year is you've been really interested in on-chain games, which is certainly not something I would have expected. So I guess maybe we take this opportunity. Why do you think fully on-chain games are interesting, and what do you think they're going to do in 2024?
Oh, well, well, I don't think it's going to be sort of mass market yet. Although I come from, not to get too long about this, so whatever, but I come from like a sort of an ideological intellectual. I've always been curious about that side of blockchain, and the reasons and motivations people have gotten into this industry. And I've found it fascinating that some developers are so strongly convinced and motivated to go fully on-chain because they have so strongly believe in the sort of core values of decentralization and digital ownership and the infinite part of it, the thing that this can't be erased by a central sort of authority. And I like that about it. And I find it, it's a really healthy progression when that gets a bigger sort of pie of the market. However, I don't expect everyone to be convinced that is necessarily the route gaming is going to have to go. And I don't think that the way the kind of operations around it at the moment, it obviously needs to advance technically. But I am really bullish on, you listen to sort of proof of place CEO Amit Mayan when he says that Pirate Nation, this is only kind of an experiment. This is just the start of where we are looking to go, a much bigger vision, and that makes me bullish. on the sort of future of it. But I think it's slow, and I think it should be slow, the adoption to on-chain, because this isn't something you want to sort of rush and run ahead, and not having the security, it's not going to give the sort of industry a good reputation. I have tried some of these games, and I find them incredibly complicated. It's almost like a full-time job sitting down trying to get into these, and once you get into one of these strategy games, if you're gonna be successful through one of the seasons, you're basically gonna have to play it 24/7. And like you say, it's a niche at the moment who plays these games, and they are so incredibly enthusiastic and passionate about it that they can devote that time. I mean, I've got a job, I've got 4 children, a husband, I can't do that. But sort of on the surface, I've been trying some of these games, and it fascinates me. It kind of, I'm curious about it. It's not sort of games for them both. You have to challenge yourself a little bit, and I don't like when things get complicated. So in a way, I like the sort of I like the challenge of the concept, yeah, and when things aren't too easy and smooth, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think it's from our different angles, both of us sort of come to the same conclusions. And I think it is interesting talking to, as you say, there are some people who that was always the games they were going to make. The only games they're ever going to make are fully on-chain games. And it is that sort of thing does come from something that probably crypto doesn't have so much. Those are the proper crypto OGs who were mining Bitcoin in whenever, as soon as they could. They just see the world in that way. It's not this sort of, you don't compromise. You're fully decentralized, or as fully decentralized as your blockchain is, and you stick it all on chain. And I think obviously, as other people have come in who aren't that sort of committed to sort of ideology, if we call it that, then they're sort of like, well, you don't want to have everything on chain because it's expensive, and you want some things just to be fast and blah blah blah, and to make sort of more performative games, you don't want to have everything on chain. And I guess that's the tension at the moment, which is why I agree with you. I don't think this year is the year for it. But as we get more of these L1 and L2s and L3s, and there's more infrastructure that you can sort of, it's just faster, you can put more things on it. Fees are always an issue. So there's always this issue is that if you have everything on chain, then you always, you could always halve your fees by taking taking half of the things you have on chain off chain, sort of thing. So there is that issue. But I think I would say over like, let's say a 10-year span, 10-year prediction, I just can't see how the sector doesn't move towards more on chain, games, or games don't end up being more on chain. I mean, I just in terms of how, I think you're right. That's sort of clear in a sense. How if you're a blockchain game, you have everything on chain, and fees will get less. Although there'll always be a case for how you deal with those. I don't know, but I just kind of think that's the way it's going to go. And if you're having games that having stored value on there, and as games sort of infinite games go obviously on forever, and they just run on servers, and that's clearly going to be seen, I think, in 10 years' time as that was the thing that everyone was sort of striving towards in blockchain games. That was going to be the end point, and maybe it takes 100 years, I don't know, but I think that's sort of where you end up, and the path of travel is you're going to end up with more of that. Quite how quickly that happens, but I just and I guess one game, I don't know if they're going fully on chain, but the EVE Online sort of project, I guess, is interesting because they are very, very hardcore about that, not about that sort of stuff, but in their mentality of what they're doing. And I can imagine that being something they sort of have as a central tenet. I don't know, I'm making that up now a little bit, but I can see, just because you're doing a fully on-chain game doesn't mean it has to be very complicated and you have to be a very geeky person. I think over time, just general game makers, and proof of play is a sort of good example actually of that you wouldn't know that game's fully on-chain really if you played it. It's got quite a cute little sort of interface and stuff like that.
But I think it's worth pointing out, like you've done in the past, John, that not every game is suitable for being fully on chain. There'll always be a category of of games that are going to be more 2.5, and there's absolutely, nothing wrong in any way going down that route. I just think we might see, that's one of the predictions, I suppose, for the coming year, we might see a bigger sort of category division rather than talking like generally about blockchain games. There's going to be, so Ubisoft is doing one sort of Web3 2.7 game, and then the video for started is fully on-chain experience, maybe within that game, a bit like Star Atlas with Sage Labs and that sort of thing. And you can sort of see where those big studios maybe start, because they have the kind of funding to do that, so maybe go down the route of experimenting a little bit. And so it'll be more defined categories within Web3 gaming, rather than Web3 gaming being the overall category.
Yeah.
And on that note about Web3 gaming as a category, it can be controversial for some people. Some people think we should completely scrap it. We've even sort of noticed a little bit of resistance of some projects, that we've covered, do they really want to be on Blockchain Gamer? They don't want to be defined as a blockchain game, so they don't want to be on a website called sort of Blockchain Gamer. What do you think of? I mean, not on the sort of politics side of things, but what's your prediction in that sense? Sort of, are we going to move away from talking about Web3 games and blockchain games and just talk about games? And then some of those games are going to have Web3. It's a little bit like kind of male and female football, I suppose. Women's football. Do we talk about that? Or should we just call it football?
Well,
without getting too political.
Go that route. No, I just think that's an argument within the navel of the industry. I mean, it's interesting for us maybe to tweeze out some sort of points, but for the vast majority of people who've never played a blockchain game, really it doesn't matter. I mean, I think the market just doesn't matter what anyone thinks in the industry. The players, in the end, they just call them games. But just like the moment, again, without always using the analogy to free-to-play mobile games, you had mobile games for a while and no one really played them, and then this, because you had to pay $1 or whatever to buy them, and then this new thing came out called free-to-play, and everyone, I was writing about it. I was running a website about it at the time, but everything was about free to play mobile, and that was interesting because it was a distinction between paid games. So you go, originally actually people would go, is it premium or is it freemium? And that was and then freemium was a bit clunky, so everyone used free to play instead. And then you had just called it F2P, and then now in mobile games you don't every game is free to play, so you don't use it anymore. So I think that again, that's another decade-long project where it will just be games. But I think I don't care whether people blockchain or Web3 or something like that. I think it's certainly for the foreseeable future it will be useful for people, and partly maybe some people won't want to touch them with a barge pole. But I think it will come back to be, if not of a super positive thing, it will just show. It will be some signalling around. This game is designed in a different way. It's thinking in a different way about stuff like ownership and community, and so I think it will become a slightly positive, for some people very positive, and for other people a slightly more positive thing. Okay, well, a builder. So we're going to stop this podcast now because the builder's just come. But anyway, thanks for listening and watching the podcast, wherever you are consuming it. 2024 is definitely going to be an interesting experience for us all. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and see you next time.